In case you missed it, a tremendous story taking place in South Carolina. They took a courageous stand by where they chose to sit down, and in breaking the law, they changed the course of history. You see, there's this saying that rules are meant to be broken. But when those rules are law, the police don't always see it that way. Especially back in 1961, when there were some very real laws with some very painful consequences. But in this story, 9 young college students taught America a valuable lesson. It's better to be on the wrong side of the law and on the right side of history. Known today as the Friendship 9, 9 young African-American men boldly stepped out, sat down against the law, and made a decision that would mark them as criminals. What they did on that day led to convictions in a court of law. Those convictions hanging over their heads for 50 years, part blemish, part badge of honor. Until now, 54 years later, the court finally took the first step toward making things right.
We cannot rewrite history, but we can write history.
It was a packed-out courthouse, while the men known only as the Friendship 9 finally saw their convictions overturned. It took 54 years for the justice system to correct their errors. Their only crime? Sitting at a whites-only lunch counter. Now those so-called trespassing convictions are officially vacated.
The right thing eventually happens. It sometimes takes longer than we'd like. You know, justice may come, it may come slowly, but it's coming and eventually it will out.
Better late than never, but you have to remember, in the early 1960s, African Americans regularly risked their beatings and imprisonment, even their own lives, just to sit at segregated lunch counters in the Jim Crow South, as it was called. In Rock Hill, South Carolina, a group of students from Friendship College stopped in a local five-and-dime restaurant to sit down in chairs, a defiant stance against segregation. You can still see the area here. That restaurant's still open. But not long after they sat down and ordered a sandwich, police forcefully dragged the men out into the streets and demanded they pay a $100 penalty, bail. When the young men refused in front of a growing mob of angry white protesters, police threw those 9 men into jail cells. But that only helped their cause in the long run. Their jailing, energizing even more acts of civil disobedience, in a rallying cry, jail, not bail, reverberated throughout the Deep South. Those 9 men, opting rather to serve a 30-day hard labor sentence, toiling and sweating in a hot southern farmland, instead of paying that $100 fine. As you can imagine, that painful image, a reminder of slavery 100 years after the start of the Civil War, that drew the news cameras. With every day that passed during that 30-day labor sentence, more news cameras flooding to the area to capture that footage of a historic moment. Those videos and their story opening the eyes of Americans and people all around the world to the pain and the injustice of racism. Our own citizens treated as criminals and slaves, all over trying to buy a sandwich at the wrong table. They were men before their time, and their courageous stand took a lot of faith. Faith that's still making a difference today.
After all this time, and here we are, being respected, and we never thought that that would happen. We believed,